Welcome to the Synthesis of Yoga, the book that changed my life. We are going through part 1 of the Synthesis of Yoga. We have finished 5 chapters of the part 1, the Yoga of Divine Works, and the 5th chapter was the Ascent of Sacrifice. And that chapter is continuing now into the 6th chapter of the book. So therefore, the Ascent of Sacrifice has 1 and 2. Now we are entering the part 2 of that chapter. And in the first one, we saw the triple sacrifice of knowledge, sacrifice of love, sacrifice of will in life. And he has covered mainly the sacrifice of knowledge, the knowledge worker. How do you transform the knowledge work into path of our inner progress? Then he initiated the exploration of the works of love and brought in the discovery of the psychic being as the core movement where this transformation can happen. And now let's start with this Ascent of Sacrifice Part 2, episode number 76. And for those who are new, I have given the link in the description. It will be very good if you follow the text, because here we are learning to imbibe Sri Aurobindo's thought patterns so that it becomes transformative. We learn to read following his rhythm and structure. And let's begin with paragraph number 1. It is, therefore, through the sacrifice of love, works, and knowledge, with the psychic being as the leader and priest of the sacrifice, that life itself can be transformed into its own true spiritual figure. So our daily life is a distorted expression of an underlying profound spiritual reality. It cannot express itself in our life. It gets mutilated, transformed, or rather changed, distorted in the process of finding expression in life. On one hand, it is true that everything is nothing but that divine. Yet, in this material expression of our life, that true divine reality cannot find its expression. It will go through distortion. Now, the yoga is helping us to bring that essential truth into an expressed reality in the material world. And in that, the leader and priest of the sacrifice is the psychic being. This image is very crucial. This comes essentially from very ancient Vedic days, the priest of the sacrifice. If you look at the Rig Veda, it begins with invocation to Agni. And Vedic yogic process is based on the knowledge of sacrifice. Sacrifice is not an outer ritual, it is that inner psychological transformation in which the leader, the leading power, they refer that symbolically as Agni. Agni is the flame of aspiration of our evolving soul within, which is referred to as the psychic being, who is the priest and the leader. So that aspiration emerging from within for greater truth, goodness, and beauty, or the divine, to know it, that reality, to connect with it, unite with it, that aspiration, that Agni, that is the leader of the sacrifice. And around that is all our daily life activities offered. And that offering is what will bring the transformation, which will eventually bring out the divine reality from deep within and an ascension into the higher planes. That's why these two chapters were called Ascent of Sacrifice. On one hand, we go inward to discover the psychic being and its intense aspiration that will infuse itself into all that we do in daily life and undergo transformation in the process. And there is an ascension into the higher and higher reality, all the way to discover the supermind. That is the whole journey. So he is just recapturing the central movement in this. It is therefore through the sacrifice of love, works, and knowledge, with the psychic being as the leader and priest of sacrifice, that life itself can be transformed into its own true spiritual figure. I have already mentioned that the Vedas begins with invocation of Agni. When you look at Sri Aurobindo's The Life Divine, there again we find the opening chapter is called Human Aspiration. It is this Agni awakening within the individual, within the collective, that enables the transformation. If the sacrifice of knowledge, rightly done, is easily the largest and purest offering we can bring to the highest. The sacrifice of love is not less demanded of us for our spiritual perfection. It is even more intense and rich in its singleness and can be made not less vast and pure. So there is these two movements. Sacrifice of knowledge. We are, on one hand, knowledge workers. And the other hand, we have this faculty of love. There is sacrifice of love. If the sacrifice of knowledge, rightly done, is easily the largest and purest offering, the sacrifice of knowledge brings certain vastness of our being because it expands us. Whereas love brings depth and richness because of its single-hearted pursuit of the beloved. The sacrifice of love is not less demanded of us for our spiritual perfection. Both are required equally in integral yoga in particular. It is even more intense and rich in its singleness and can be made not less vast and pure. So it can bring equally certain vastness and purity along with intensity and richness of experience. The pure wideness brought into the intensity of sacrifice of love, when into all our activities there is poured the spirit and power, divine infinite joy, and the whole atmosphere of our life is suffused with an engrossing adoration of the one who is the all and the highest. So when these two come together, on one hand, the pure wideness is brought into the intensity of the sacrifice of love. Wideness and intensity. When these two come together, this pure wideness is brought into the intensity of sacrifice of love. And when love intensifies and widens to embrace the wider and wider scope of love, our love starts with loving oneself, one's family, then enlarging into the larger circles of society. And heart expands and expands and expands to encompass whole universe, and then loving the divine behind all things and transcendent. So there is a whole expansion and wideness of love that happens. So there is a widening movement, then comes the other, which is intensification of love. where we become increasingly clear that there is the Supreme Being who is guiding, protecting, and there is a profound love and adoration towards this Supreme Being behind all things. Even though initially we may experience it as impersonal, even when the grace pours into our life, we feel it is impersonal, but progressively we come in touch with direct contact with the divine presence, and that connection grows into very clear, intimate relationship with the lover and the beloved. That relationship intensifies. So this pure wideness is brought into the intensity of the sacrifice of love. When into all our sacrifice there is poured the spirit and power of a divine infinite joy. So this is that intensification of love brings the infinite joy, divine infinite joy. And the whole atmosphere of our life is suffused with an engrossing adoration of the One. So as we progress, our whole life gets suffused with that beautiful perfume of the adoration of the one beloved, divine, who is permeating all things. And that begins to infuse everything that we do. Our adoration for the beloved. That will touch every little thing that we do. We are also expanding to see the divine's presence and love upholding the world, guiding the people. So we get the knowledge of it and profound relationship, intensity. It suffuses with an engrossing adoration of the one who is all and the highest. One who is all and the highest. For then does the sacrifice of love attain its utter perfection. When offered to the divine all, it becomes integral, Catholic, and boundless. And when uplifted to the Supreme, it ceases to be the weak, superficial, and transient movement men call love, and becomes a pure and grand and deep uniting Ananda. We, in our human life, we have the experience of love, human love and affection. That itself is experienced as something quite intense and something that runs into its difficulties, its heartbreaks, its pain, loss of love. Everything happens in the human way. It's a very limited, distorted experience of a deeper, profound love, though our faculty of the heart enables us to experience it. And when the heart opens and deepens, that is where the widening, we begin to discover the presence of the psychic being and its unconditional love, and it will widen and encompass all life, because we will discover the divine presiding over all things. That is where all, the divine all in the existence is recognized as various facets and masks of the divine, or the people, animals, birds, landscapes, nature. Everything is seen as various expressions of the divine who is present. That's one. And then there is an ascension upward into the highest. So there is an inward movement, an expansion, and an ascension into the highest. So these three movements brings its integrality, its universality, and boundlessness. It is, so let me read this line once again. For then does the sacrifice of love attain its utter perfection, when, offered to the divine all. Offered to the divine all, not just to one or other form, to the all, everything. And it becomes integral, Catholic, and boundless. So that is the expansion. It become integral, Catholic, it become universal and boundless, infinite. And when uplifted to the Supreme, so one is expanding and covering the whole existence, and then there is an upliftment into the Supreme, into the higher and higher planes of existence. It ceases to be the weak, superficial, and transient movement men call love. Our human love is something very transient, little waves coming and going, little drips of love. And it's very weak, feeble, and it's very superficial. But it is a tiny little taste of something profoundly mysterious hidden deep in our heart. So that is what we need to discover, and from there expand to cover all, and then ascend to the Supreme. So it ceases to be weak, superficial, and transient movement men call love, and becomes a pure and grand and deep uniting Ananda. It is a uniting Ananda. It unites the whole existence, whole life, whole everything that we encounter in life, we experience in life. There is a unification with everything. It's a uniting Ananda. It's not a dividing experience, but a uniting experience where we feel intimately one with even the very substance of whole existence, whole life, everything that is around. So it is a profound unifying Ananda. For then does the sacrifice of love attain its utter perfection when offered to the divine all. It becomes integral, Catholic, and boundless. And when uplifted to the Supreme, it ceases to be the weak, superficial, and transient movement men call love, and becomes a pure and grand and deep uniting Ananda. Although it is a divine love for the Supreme and universal, divine, that must be the rule of our spiritual existence, this does not exclude altogether all forms of individual love or the ties that draw soul to soul in manifested existence. So these are not exclusive pursuits. When our goal is the universal divine, whom we seek in all that is there in existence, everything that we do, yet it doesn't exclude our soul to soul contacts, the ties of love in our everyday life. Human relationships are not excluded, even when we are pursuing the universal divine behind all things. It has a place. The human relationships do have a place. So, although it is a divine love for the supreme and universal divine that must be the rule of our spiritual existence, this does not exclude altogether all forms of individual love. All forms of individual love. There is love for parents, love for children, love for siblings, love for brothers, sisters, our neighbors, love for animals, birds, the world. There are so many different forms of love, and love eventually pouring into work itself and all that you do. Fields of knowledge your love pours into, everything begins to merge. All forms of individual love or the ties that draw soul to soul in manifested existence. So here it is more particular human relationships, the ties that draw soul to soul in manifested existence. When we take birth, we are taking birth in a family. there are parents, there are brothers, sisters, grandparents. Then comes children, grandchildren. There's a whole range of relationships. And then our colleagues. And we find ourselves woven into all their lives. And some relationships where soul to soul connection becomes so intimately real. Some connections become antagonistic, struggling relationships. Some become very soul to soul connection. So there are all types of relationships into which our individual life finds itself to be tied and woven into. So all that are part of our larger journey, and we cannot just pluck ourselves out of it unless we are only interested in the formulas and getting out of the world. Here we are looking at transformation. So all these ties of soul to soul is part of our journey. So all forms of individual love or the ties that draw soul to soul in manifested existence. Everything is considered. A psychic change is demanded. A divestiture of the masks of ignorance, a purification of the egoistic mental, vital, and physical movements that prolong the old inferior consciousness. So our normal human consciousness is something quite inferior. We are mental beings, and it has its limited sense of perception. Mind and human nature sees everything as separate. And with its attachments and insecurities and attractions, repulsions, likes, dislikes, it's a very inferior way of working with all the dualities of human nature, experience, psychological nature, and its experience. From there, we are shifting to the psychic. And there is a psychic change that is demanded. In that process, a divestiture. That is, we are in a way selling off all the subsidiary ways of our being, lower nature and its activities. We are letting go of all that and purifying an emerging psychic being, bringing its love and light and radiance. That is what will transform this inferior consciousness of the outer nature, so that we don't prolong the mental, vital, physical movements. And let me read this first portion of this paragraph. A psychic change is demanded, a divestiture of the masks of ignorance. We have many masks of ignorance, the triple layers of masks, the physical mask, the vital mask, the mental mask of ignorance. So they have their operations. So divestiture of the masks of ignorance, a purification of the egoistic, mental, vital, and physical movement. So on one hand, we let go of all our limited masks, superficial outer layers, and there is a purification of all the egoistic movement. Our normal nature is bound by ego, therefore it is thinking in terms of I, me, and myself. And there is corresponding thoughts, emotions, and physical actions centered around I, me, and myself, that progressively shift into divine centered. It is that which will become the center, not me. I am serving the divine, like the earth going around the sun. Sun become the center, the divine become the center. Otherwise, ego want everything to go around me, I, me, and myself, with its corresponding mental narratives, emotional needs, physical actions. So all that gets replaced, purified of the ego. And so this inferior consciousness gets transformed. Each movement of love, spiritualized, must depend no longer on mental preference, vital passion, or physical craving. So these are the three instrumental layers. So each movement of love, spiritualized, must depend no longer on mental preference, vital passion, or physical craving. These three generally limits our experience of love, whether it is mental preference, mental knowledge, and its limited understanding that is controlling our experience of love, or the vital passion, our vital nature want its satisfactions, and that will limit the experience of love, or the physical craving, the body and its cravings would limit the experience of love. So all that should not be the case. So each movement of love, spiritualized, must depend no longer on mental preference, vital passion, or physical craving, but on the recognition of the soul by soul. So when we meet someone, can we connect to the soul of the person? See through the outer layers of the body, the vital, the mental layerings. Can you touch the soul of the person? That is where the soul connection, the soul family come into picture, which is very different from normal outer ties of blood, our body connections. Beyond that, when we come into the soul family, we have to first connect, recognize the soul in the other. And that will be possible only to the extent we are in touch with our own soul and come from that space. On the recognition of soul by soul, love restored to its fundamental spiritual and psychic essence. Love getting restored instead of getting distorted, colored, and disfigured. It gets restored in its essential purity of the spiritual and psychic essence. With mind, the vital, the physical, as manifesting instruments and elements of that greater oneness. So on one hand, love gets purified into its spiritual and psychic essence, and then it can radiate and flow out through the mind, the vital and physical, as manifesting instruments and elements of that greater oneness. So they become instruments. These triple layers, mental, vital, physical layers, become the instruments. So instead of distorting agents, they become passive channels of expression of a divine love that is already there within us. We have to discover that. And when that pours into, that itself becomes the very transformation of this mental, vital, physical nature. Instead of running away from these instrumental layers, we purify and transform them. They become the instruments through which a greater oneness will find expression in life. That's our goal. We are not withdrawing, we are embracing the experience of a greater oneness through all these instrumental layers, not just from a formless existence, but in this world of form, through the mind, through the heart, even through the physical nature, there is an experience of oneness that is possible. And there, normally the distortion happens. So we have to stand back, go and discover this inner purity, pure essence, restoring love in its pure essence. And from there it radiates and uses these instruments. A psychic change is demanded, a divestiture of the masks of the ignorance, a purification of the egoistic mental, vital, and physical movements that prolong the old inferior consciousness. Each movement of love, spiritualized, must depend no longer on mental preference, vital passion, or physical craving, but on the recognition of soul by soul, love restored to its fundamental spiritual and psychic essence, with the mind, the vital, the physical as manifesting instruments and elements of that great oneness. Often, when oneness is brought into conversation, we see many are referring to oneness at a formless level, or oneness as experienced by the mind in the world of its cognition, pure perception level. There is oneness at the level of emotional connection, the vital itself, the energetic level oneness, even sensational level oneness, and all the way down to the body, material oneness, because matter itself is one continuum. So we can experience that all the material nature, you're one with the entire material nature, not only in perception, but even in its capacity to move matter itself. That is the whole spectrum of oneness, integral oneness spreading across various layers of our being. That's what we are looking at. In this change, the individual love also is converted by a natural heightening into a divine love. For the divine inhabitant, immanent in a mind and soul and body, occupied by the one in all creatures, occupied the one in all creatures. There is the immanent divine who is the occupant, the inhabitant of all life, all forms of existence. Ishavasya Upanishad starts with that declaration. Ishavasyam idam sarvam yat kincha jagatyam jagat. So that presence dwelling, inhabiting every little form, tiniest particles to the largest cosmos. That is what we are looking at, connecting, becoming one with the. It is, on one hand, there is a heightening, and then there is this deepening, widening, embracing the divine inhabitant, immanent in a mind and soul and body. In a mind and soul and body. Incarnation, soul's incarnation. It has to pick up a body, there is the mind in it. So that all these layers, everything get infused and permeated. And there is an occupation by the immanent divine. We discover that in all creatures, not just within us. Divine in us, divine in all, in everything. So in this change, the individual love is also converted by a natural heightening into a divine love for the divine inhabitant, immanent in a mind and soul and body, occupied by the one in all creatures. So we discover the immanent divine, there is a universal divine, transcendent divine. All that experiences will become possible through love. We are here talking about path of the works of love, when it deepens and discovers this essence and heightens, widens. This is where we eventually arrive at the immanent divine, the inhabitant in all things. All love, indeed, that is adoration, has a spiritual force behind it. Adoration, love and adoration, ability to give oneself, admire someone. That's where the ego naturally is surrendering and just melting in love, adoring, admiring. That's a great experience capacity, something that needs to be also cultivated. And that's what we need to turn towards the divine, adoring, admiring the divine. And that is where this spiritual force behind it gets activated. And all love, indeed, that is adoration, has a spiritual force behind it. There is adoration is an incredibly powerful movement coming from the heart where there is the self-giving. So that movement is animated by profound spiritual force. That's why consciously recognizing your ability to adore and admire. We may start with admiring people, adoring people. Every child is a hero worshipper. That capacity is there. And that's a great doorway. Eventually, moving towards adoring the divine in whatever form that you relate to. But the movement is the same, and it has profound spiritual force behind it. So all love, indeed, that is adoration, has a spiritual force behind it. And even when it is offered ignorantly and to a limited object, so that too, spiritual force is still there, even when it is done ignorantly in our ignorant way of conducting life, where even when there is a love for the divine, it is largely for one's own personal benefit. Do this to me. People go to temples and pray for this or that. Even in that, but there is the relationship. There is someone whom you can rely entirely, and you adore, you admire, you have a complete faith in that being. That moves something from deep within you. So even when it is offered to a limited object, ignorantly done, still it has the power behind it. Something of that splendor appears through the poverty of the right and smallness of its issues. So this issues that is brought forth by the ignorant human nature usually is very petty, small things. In yoga, we are talking about something profoundly deep and vast. But human nature, even when it approaches the divine, brings many of its small issues. And when it is simple human adoration of another human being, they're also even smaller. Issues become very, very small. But behind all that, still something of the splendor finds its expression. The very ability to adore, in which there is a self-forgetfulness, there is the ability to give oneself. You are erasing the ego in the process. It is the other person who is the center. And in that admiration, adoration, there is a natural infusion of qualities. Opening of the heart makes everything easy. The work flows very naturally, spontaneously when there is an adoration. That's what it opens a greater flow of force through you. All love, indeed, that is adoration, has a spiritual force behind it. And even when it is offered ignorantly and to a limited object, something of that splendor appears through the poverty of the right and the smallness of its issues. For love that is worship adoration, with adoration comes worship. We have all the stories with heroic characters, and spontaneously we tend to adore and worship heroes. Hero worship is very natural to human heart, because it is through that you learn to spontaneously open to certain higher qualities, possibilities, and imbibe that nature. Something in your heart is opening up and widening. All love that is worship is at once an aspiration and a preparation. So when you admire somebody, that means there is a growing aspiration in you to imbibe those qualities in that person, the light in that person, the nature of that being. And it is preparing you. So there is a growing aspiration and a preparation happening in that love that is adoration and worship. It is beyond attachments. There is adoration, there is worship, there is a growing purity in that. And in that process, there is an infusion. For love that is worship is at once an aspiration and a preparation. So it's perfectly all right to adore, to worship, wherever your heart is opening in this direction. That's healthy, that's beautiful, that's very good. That helps in sadhana. It can bring, even within its small limits in the ignorance, a glimpse of a still more or less blind and partial but surprising realization. So, even within its limits, it can bring a glimpse of a partial but surprising realization. For there are moments when it is not we, but the one who loves and is loved in us. We think I am the one who is loving the other. But there are moments when the veil is removed and you experience it is the one, the all permeating divine, the one who loves and is loved in us. That's where the glimpse begins. You recognize that this is, you thought it is you who are loving the other. Then you realize that you are loved, and the love in you is of the one who is loving. And that is pouring out. And you're receiving it and you're pouring it, flowing, it is flowing through you. And it is not you who, as a separate, isolated little ego, who is loving, but you're recognizing that it is the one who is loving and who is loved. Two sides of one love. And that glimpse can open up. When the veil, there are moments when this veil is removed and there is this profound love in which you are experiencing. You thought it is you who loves the divine, or you worship the divine, but suddenly you see that you're profoundly loved. You're held in that embrace of love. And that is where the merging, melting happens. And that's a profound glimpse into a greater intensity of love, which this nature of love will become growing adoration and worship opens up for the lover. You see this profound love pouring into you and pouring through you, and there is this flow that is beautiful to be experienced. And even a human passion can be uplifted and glorified by a slight glimpse of this infinite love and lover. So our passion can get uplifted and glorified by this glimpse. And this is where a profound intensity grows and a vast capacity of self giving enters with this uniting ananda, what he mentioned before, a melting into a vaster reality and experience of love that lifts up our human passion into its glorified possibilities. Let's read this incredible, amazing window that Aurobindo is opening up through this line. For love that is worship is at once an aspiration and a preparation. It can bring, even within its small limits, in the ignorance, a glimpse of a still more or less blind and partial but surprising realization. For there are moments when it is not we, but the one who loves and is loved in us. And even a human passion can be uplifted and glorified by a slight glimpse of this infinite love and lover. It is for this reason that the worship of the God, the worship of the idol, the human magnet or ideal are not to be despised. There is a tendency to despise idol worship. In fact, religions like Islam denies this, in fact, reacts violently towards idol worship. Only approach allowed in Islam is the formless. But the human heart needs an idol to build that relationship. Even when you are approaching that which is formless, inhabitant of all things, idol worship helps for the heart to open up. Those who enter through the path of knowledge and they are only opening in the domain of knowledge, they don't find this idol worship meaningful, useful. It is okay, but don't despise the idol worship just because your path is through knowledge. It doesn't matter for you. But if you want to open the heart and connect through experience of love, then the idol worship and human magnet or ideal, because your guru, your master, become a reference point for you for your love and adoration. The human magnet, it is a magnet. In love, the other person is a magnet who is drawing you. You are admiring, you are adoring, you are worshipping, and there is a growing aspiration in you to merge with that person, that being, that light, that love, that profound wisdom that is radiating through that individual. So, whether it is an idol, a photograph, a human magnet, or an ideal that you're holding, it is through that the love and adoration and worship can enter, widen, and open this profound glimpse of oneness in which you are experiencing you are profoundly loved. So, when you see the idol worship or human adoration, these are not to be despised. It has a role to play. These are many, many different ways the human approach the divine. Limiting to just one way of approaching is not healthy. There is this tremendous diverse pathways And these pathways exist because human nature has so many different faculties. And for an integral realization, all these are required. So, for the heart to connect, this is the legitimate way. For these are steps through which the human race moves towards that blissful passion and ecstasy of the infinite. So, these are the steps for the human race to pass through towards that blissful passion and ecstasy of the infinite. We have our human passion, which is very narrow and limited. But the infinite being behind the universe has a profound, infinite passion and ecstasy that we can experience by opening the heart through love, adoration, worship. And as we merge into that, we see that you are deeply loved and held by that love, and it pours through you and frees you up, liberates you, which even in limiting it, they yet represent for our imperfect vision when we have still to use the inferior steps nature has hewn for our feet and admit the stages of our progress. So the nature has created in the evolutionary process, she has created this body, this whole senses, nervous system, the vitality, energy, and a heart that can feel deeper and wider. These are instruments of nature. However limited it was in the evolutionary journey, now they are ready and beginning to open up. And these are all pathways nature has created, not in any random way, because she is creating these instrumental layers for a rich experience of the full symphony flowing through the mind, the heart, the energy, the body, everything. It is for this reason the worship of the God, the worship of the idol, the human magnet or ideal are not to be despised, for these are steps through which the human race moves towards that blissful passion and ecstasy of the infinite, which, even in limiting it, they yet represent for our imperfect vision, because our vision is imperfect, limited. Therefore, we tend to limit, even if it limits, which even in limiting it, they yet represent our imperfect vision when we have still to use the inferior steps nature has hewn for our feet and admit the stages of our progress. So there is stage by stage progress, and we are admitting all possibilities so that we have an integral realization that can find its expression in life. Certain idolatries are indispensable for the development of our emotional being. We have emotional being, which is different from the mental being. Mental being is seeking knowledge, whereas emotional being is seeking love. Therefore, for the emotional being to develop, certain idolatries are indispensable. So, in the Bhakti Yoga, wherever you find it, you will find idol worship. That is how the heart opens to the divine. Certain idolatries are indispensable for the development of our emotional being. Nor will the man who knows be hasty at any time to shatter the image unless he can replace it in the heart of the worshipper by the reality it figures. So, you don't shatter and throw away the idols, worship, that approach, unless the reality the idol represents has been found deep in your heart. Only when you find that reality of the beloved, a living reality, then only the shattering of the idol, the external forms of worship can be said, enough, this is not required. So one shouldn't hurry in order to get rid of the idol worship when the heart is opening up. It has a place and it will remain, or it must remain, till this deep discovery of that reality unveils itself in all that is existing all around you. Then a particular limited idol may not need it. You may keep it, you may not require it. It doesn't matter. But it is that one you see everywhere. So certain idolatries are indispensable for the development of our emotional being. Nor will the man who knows be hasty at any time to shatter the image unless he can replace it in the heart of the worshipper by the reality it figures. Moreover, they have this power because there is always something in them that is greater than their forms. So, all the forms of worship, there is something in them that is greater than the forms. They have this power because there is always something in them that is greater than their forms. And even when we reach the supreme worship that abides and becomes a prolongation of it or a part of its Catholic wholeness. So even when we reach that highest worship, and that abides and becomes a prolongation of it, the specific forms through which we adore, that will continue as a prolongation and expansion. This single deity that you adored, you will find the same deity in everything and everyone and everywhere. So it is not lost and it is not eliminated. In fact, it becomes universal, part of its Catholic wholeness, its universal wholeness. So remember the discussion about the Ishta Devata in the introductory part, where you may get drawn to a particular archetypal form of the divine. And through that, as you enter, eventually you find your Ishtadevata in all other deities, all other forms, and everywhere it becomes universal. Everything finds its meaning in the doorway through which you have entered. They have this power because there is always something in them that is greater than their forms. And even when we reach the supreme worship that abides and becomes a prolongation of it or a part of its Catholic wholeness, our knowledge is still imperfect in us, love incomplete. If even when we know that which surpasses all forms and manifestations, we cannot still accept the divine in creature and object, in man, in the kind, in the animal, in the tree, in the flower, in the work of our hands, in the nature force, which is then no longer to us the blind action of a material machinery, but a phase and power of the universal Shakti. For in these things too is the presence of the eternal. So we are moving from imperfection to perfection. Our knowledge is still imperfect in us, love incomplete, if even when we know that. So we have come in touch with the divine consciousness, but still our knowledge and love is slowly expanding, growing towards its perfection because we are bound within our mental, vital, physical nature. Naturally comes the limitations, imperfections. We come in touch. We know that, but imperfections are still there. But we are moving towards greater and greater perfection. Our knowledge is still imperfect in us, love incomplete. If, even when we know that which surpasses all forms and manifestations, we cannot still accept the divine in creature and object. So we may first get to know the divine behind all things, that one eternal, timeless self, one being. That may come, but it is very hard to accept that every form that is around, every creature that is around, every object that is around is an expression of that. It's very difficult to know that, to accept it, to experience it. Without experience, we cannot accept. Though you may start with a mental conception that all that I touch and see and feel and know, all that is around, everything is nothing but the divine. But it is not experience, it is still orienting the mind to open itself. And then when the heart too, its love expands. Initially it is very narrow, it is not opening. And towards all creatures or objects to enter into experience. So we cannot still accept the divine in creature and object, in man, in the kind, in the animal, in the tree, in the flower, in the works of our hands, in the nature force. We are working, and through us is flowing nature force. We are not separate from nature. It is nature's profound vitality, creative force, and behind her, the divine impulsions that is flowing. So when we are working through us, it is nature force that is flowing through us. And we need to recognize that it is not I who I am the one working. I mean, that is the illusion we have. We have to recognize that it is the nature force that is working through us. Nature force, which is then no longer to us the blind action of a material machinery, but a phase and power of the universal Shakti. It is the universal Shakti who is permeating all beings and flowing through us and all things. We have this beautiful line, Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Matrurupena Samstita Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Shaktirupena Samstita Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. We are consciously recognizing that Sarvabhuteshu, behind all beings, there is this divine Shakti present as the mother, who is flowing through. Behind nature force, it is the divine Shakti who is flowing through. It is not the action of a material nature. Science may study our material body and say it is the material nature's forces that are flowing through us, doing the digestion, processing of all things, and our physical action in the world, and our creative action in the world. It is all animated by the physical forces of nature. That's what science may say. But yoga is saying the force is conscious. There is Shakti who is flowing through everyone, everything, and that is animating you and everything else, and we have to recognize her in all creatures, everywhere. Creature and object, in man, in the kind, in the animal, in the tree, in the flower, in the works of our hands, in the nature force, which is then no longer to us the blind action of a material machinery, though it flows through the machinery of things. There is atomic molecular structure and machinery through which everything is flowing through. But the conscious force is flowing through and shaping them. for material machinery, but a phase and power of the universal Shakti. A phase. There are many aspects of her. That's where the four powers of the mother come into picture. Her wisdom aspect flowing, sometimes her power aspect flowing, sometimes her love aspect flowing, sometimes her dexterity in action and perfection dimension flowing through. So it's a phase and power of the universal Shakti that is flowing through us, through everyone, through everything. For in these things too is the presence of the eternal. So in everything is the presence of the eternal, the timeless, eternal, divine reality is behind all things. So we are moving towards that realization through opening of the heart and moving from limitation to greater and greater wideness, opening, integration, and greater passion and ecstasy of the infinite. Let's read this line once again. Our knowledge is still imperfect in us, love incomplete, if even when we know that which surpasses all forms and manifestations, we cannot still accept the divine in creature and object, in man, in the kind, in the animal, in the tree, in the flower, in the works of our hands, in the nature force, which is then no longer to us the blind action of a material machinery, but a phase and power of the universal Shakti. For in these things too is the presence of the eternal. So this is how, when the heart opens to the divine and begins to expand, deepen, and ascend into higher possibilities, this is how our experience unfolds. It's beautiful to enter through the path of the heart and love and works of love. And when love opens up, that is when the force that is flowing through our hands and our mind and our speech and our body, everything, we see it is that which is flowing through. It is the divine Shakti who is doing the works. And you discover her action, her splendor, her beauty, her ananda. That's it. And it is a uniting ananda. She is referred to as Anandamai. She is Chaitanyamai. She is Satyamai. She brings truth. She brings consciousness. She brings Ananda. So that is what is ahead of us in this journey. So thank you for being with me in this journey of exploration, diving deep into Sri Aurobindo. Please do subscribe to this channel and share your insights. That will help others as well to take this journey seriously and increase the ripple of this profound love that is pouring into the world through each one of us, through whatever be the limited possibility we have. But life has given us this opportunity. So let's serve that profound love for the divine. Thank you. See you next week.